Your child will receive this welcome kit that includes a membership certificate, an ID card, a colorful iron-on emblem, plus the chance to compete for a $5,000 scholarship. And when you call with your gift order, we'll also mail a special personalized gift card from you. Call 1-800-257-1257. That's 1-800-257-1257. 12 colorful issues, junior membership, and the welcome kit, plus a card from you. This gift lasts a year. The benefits last a lifetime.
This is CNN.
Good evening from London. I'm Jim Clancy, sitting in for Hillary Bowker.
And good afternoon from Washington. I'm David French, in for Frank Stesno. Coming up, a city where playtime has become a sad reflection of wartime.
Children don't go to school anymore. Instead, they are teaching themselves a lesson in real life.
Christiana Amanpour reports on the lives of the children in Sarajevo.
Also, dozens dead and missing as floodwaters surge through southern France. We begin in Sarajevo. Its 380,000 besieged inhabitants waiting helplessly for the resumption of Western aid flights. It's relatively quiet in the city for the moment, but months of exploding artillery shells and ricocheting snipers' bullets have taken a great toll on the citizens, and especially on the children. As CNN's Christiana Amanpour reports, even the games they play are affected by the fighting.
Children have always played cops and robbers. Playing with guns is nothing new. Only here the game has a horrible ring of truth. The streets of Sarajevo are filled with children at war, firing their toy weapons, mounting their own guerrilla campaigns from the bushes. Children don't go to school anymore. Instead, they are teaching themselves a lesson in real life. Playgrounds have been turned into battlegrounds where they act out what goes on around them all the time, with frightening accuracy, right down to treating their wounded. They do it with smiles and laughter, but they're not kidding themselves. They can't hide their fear. I can't sleep properly at night, she says. I'm afraid. I'm always waiting for the next shell to fall. Amala is 11 years old. She plays doctor, but she knows that children are really being killed and injured in the relentless shelling of this city. A visit to the hospital shows just how many children have been injured. A mortar round robbed this 3-year-old of her leg and her father. A mother's heart breaks as she watches over her 12-year-old son. Shrapnel tore off both his legs and an arm. It's so hard, he says, and he wishes the war would end. But the ward is full of toy soldiers who've been drafted as runners between troops on the real front lines, who've paid dearly for the Bosnian army's lack of communications equipment. Back where the war is still just a game, even those who can't know what's going on join in. These two haven't yet been told that their fathers were killed on the front. Parents watch helplessly, unwilling to interfere, unable to provide their children with a better alternative.
These games are just a reflection of our sad reality. The doors of hell have opened in Sarajevo. I think this is the darkest place on the planet.
And the darkest days of these young lives. Christiana Amanpour, CNN, Sarajevo.
Prime Minister Milan Panic accuses the UN of slowing chances for peace in the former Yugoslavia. In an unprecedented move, the General Assembly voted last night to expel Yugoslavia, now made up of just Serbia and Montenegro. Belgrade already is struggling under a UN-imposed trade embargo. Serbia and Montenegro already have applied for readmission as a new state, but are unlikely to be admitted while the war in Bosnia continues. There were mixed views on the vote in Belgrade.
Well, I'm sorry because they excluded us from the United Nations, but I think it was normal because the old Yugoslavia doesn't exist anymore, so we have to apply again for membership. I think that it's a disaster for the whole world, but for us, I think that we could survive.
The only thing I can say is thank God, because that organization has turned into a pure caricature of itself. And I don't even think that we should apply for readmission.
And the United States has struck an additional blow. It submitted to the UN a list of alleged war crimes committed by Serbians in Bosnia. Among the U.S. charges, holding prisoners in detention camps, torture, deportation, and abuse of civilians. The U.S. wants the UN to investigate the charges and prosecute offenders.
50 mass graves holding the remains of more than 12,000 people have been uncovered in eastern Germany. The dead were victims of Soviet internment after World War II. They died of hunger, illness, and violence in the Stalinist prison at Sachsenhausen between 1945 and 1950. The Sachsenhausen prison had served as a Nazi concentration camp during World War II. A number of mass graves have been unearthed in eastern Germany since the 1989 Democratic Revolution that reunited East and West Germany.
Investigators combing through the archives of the now-defunct KGB in Moscow have turned up evidence of Americans held prisoner. Not U.S. servicemen, as it turns out, but civilians. CNN's Claire Shipman reports on new clues and old animosities.
Russian President Boris Yeltsin disclosed details Wednesday on the fate of 2 U.S. prisoners rumored to have been executed here under Joseph Stalin. Information on the 2 men, identified only by family names of Oggins and Clifford, was given to Malcolm Toon, former ambassador to the Soviet Union and co-chairman of the joint team searching for POWs here. Toon's Russian counterpart, General Dmitry Volkogonov, said that Oggins was a civilian arrested in 1939 for spying. He said a KGB document made reference to his quote-unquote liquidation 8 years later.
They could have said a lot in the West about the camps, about the system, so the system took strong measures to liquidate them.
U.S. officials say they plan to release other information about the men once the families have been notified. Although not prisoners of war, the information on Clifford and Oggins came to light in the ongoing search for U.S. POWs in the former Soviet Union. Volkogonov says he's certain there are no surviving U.S. POWs in the country. The Americans agree that it's unlikely, but say they'd like more details about the fate of their citizens.
I don't think we've made as much progress, Mr. President, as I had hoped. But I think we are beginning to open up the channels of information.
Results have been few to date. An alleged sighting of a prisoner said to be a U.S. pilot shot down in the Korean War, David Markin, sparked a tour of the prison camp region of Pechora. He wasn't found. On Wednesday, the joint team was in Totma, searching for the same flyer on a tip that he was transferred to a prison there. The Russians have disclosed a list of 49 U.S. citizens or residents who lived in the Soviet Union and who were imprisoned by Stalin at the end of World War II. None of them were POWs. A few are still alive but don't plan to leave. Ambassador Toon said that the latest disclosures are not all that startling.
I'm not surprised that this sort of thing happened, because under the old regime here, which I knew very well, I had 3 tours of duty in the old Soviet Union. I was ambassador when Mr. Brezhnev was running the show. They were capable of doing anything, including execution of American POWs, so I'm not surprised.
There is still a sense on the U.S. side that some forces here, fearing reprisals, are holding back information about U.S. prisoners, especially POWs. General Volkogonov himself believes that some of the files at the KGB archives have been removed and will probably never be found. Claire Shipman, CNN, Moscow.
Defense ministers from Armenia and Azerbaijan have agreed once again to a ceasefire in the disputed territory of Nagorno-Karabakh. The 2-month-long ceasefire is scheduled to begin Friday night in the mountainous region. Earlier truces between the 2 former republics have failed, and the fighting continued today. The UN estimates 3,000 people have been killed in 4 years of fighting that has forced 500,000 to flee from their homes. Still to come on the International Hour, UN relief efforts in Somalia continue as U.S. troops keep a watchful eye.
And Somalia isn't the only African nation facing starvation. We'll talk with an African policy analyst about the famine in Mozambique.
The International Hour is brought to you by the National Education Association, which reminds you that children are our most precious national resource, and by AFLAC, insuring over 35 million people worldwide.
Now that the Cold War is over, it's time to invest at home. Invest in medicine. invest in the arts, technology, housing, and in education. And when you think about it, when you invest in our children and in our public schools, you invest in everything. Children, our most precious national resource.
That's life.
Dad, you guys around next week? Not me, I'm off to State College on Saturday.
You're still going? That's great.
What about your dad's surgery?
Yeah, the bills and stuff.
No problem. He had some extra insurance to help pick up the bills.
Hey, all right.
Aflac supplemental insurance helps close the gaps in your health insurance, like deductibles and co-payments. Aflac lets life go right on, and that's the peace of mind you want. Aflac, insuring over 35 million people worldwide.
Who are you going to call the most this month?
My grandparents in Philippines.
My uncle, Supermaniam, who lives in Agra, India.
With Sprint's new program, The Most, you automatically save 20% off whoever you call the most each month.
I call Wim in the Netherlands.
And with The Most, you can also choose a plan that lets you save 20% on international calls.
Mom in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
My sister in Munich.
My sister in Sri Lanka.
Doesn't anyone have relatives in Buffalo anymore?
Before you freeze, remember this rule of thumb. Get Ziploc brand freezer bags with the gripper zipper. Tough, tiny teeth you can feel gripping, so you know freshness is locked in, freezer burns out. Do like me. Protect your ears. There's only one Ziploc.
When important people have something to say, they say it on CNN.
For the fatheads at General Motors.
Get in touch with the people shaping the news. Watch Newsmaker Sunday with Frank Sesno. Sundays on CNN.
Relief efforts to some villages in rural areas of Somalia are on hold tonight. Heavy rains have turned the dirt airstrips into muddy runways. But officials hope to resume flights very soon. Meanwhile, the airlifts continue in other towns. Here's CNN's Gary Stryker.
More UN troops and equipment reach Mogadishu every day. By the end of this week, the full contingent should be here, 500 armed Pakistani soldiers. More UN troops means more protection for food relief sent here for millions of starving Somalis. UNICEF's Goodwill Ambassador Audrey Hepburn was in Mogadishu to meet the troops.
Now that our blue helmets are here, I think things are looking not so blue, but rosy. Better.
U.S. military cargo planes are bringing the troops here from Pakistan.
We're the best in the business when it comes to moving large groups of personnel and large amounts of equipment one country or another. It just stands to reason that we were asked to help out, and we're always willing to help out.
Command and control of this operation comes from 25 miles offshore, a U.S. Naval Amphibious Readiness Group with landing craft and 2,100 Marines. The UN commander says U.S. support has been essential to this operation.
So it's a great extension of help to the United Nations that this kind of support has been extended to bring in the peacekeepers.
The strongest military faction in Somalia, led by Mohammed Farah Aidid, initially called the arrival of the U.S. Navy ships a provocation, but afterwards said they had no objection. The U.S. has downplayed its role in this operation, but amphibious assault craft and Marines send a strong message to the warlords to back away from any confrontation with UN troops. In a few weeks, the UN soldiers will take up positions in Mogadishu's port and airport to guard incoming relief supplies and escort food convoys to distribution points in the city. This is the first time the UN has sent armed troops to an African conflict since the Congo crisis more than 30 years ago. And while these soldiers now have a limited humanitarian mission, they could be the start of a much bigger military operation here. The UN Security Council has authorized 3,000 more troops for Somalia, but the main warlords have so far agreed to allow only these 500. There is growing support worldwide to declare Somalia a UN trusteeship, but that would need many thousands of troops and a huge financial commitment. Meanwhile, the U.S. Navy and Marines will leave Somalia's coast after all 500 UN soldiers have arrived. These men will then be on their own in this city, surrounded by thousands of armed gunmen. Gary Stryker, CNN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
While Somalia has been getting much attention lately, other potential crises are brewing in southern Africa. Also ravaged by drought and civil war, Mozambique could become another Somalia if action is not taken immediately. Joining us to discuss the situation is Sharon Pauling, an African policy analyst with Bread for the World, a lobbying group which addresses food and hunger issues. Mrs. Pauling has just returned from Southern Africa. Thanks indeed for coming over.
You're welcome, David.
How realistic is today's call by Mozambique for the safe food corridors into the war zones where there are so many victims, but in a war zone?
Absolutely critical. The Renamo, which is the insurgent group that's been waging a war against the government of Mozambique, is currently involved in peace talks with the government. It's not clear, actually, that they'll reach some resolve, and this is the frightening thing, because war is clearly the major cause of hunger in that country right now. Drought is only exacerbating the impact of the war that's been going on since 1980.
Where does Renamo get its weapons now, and didn't the United States play quite a role for a long time?
Well, we don't have a lot of official or real documentation that the U.S. has ever provided official assistance to Renamo, but clearly the bulk of the aid to Renamo has been coming out of South Africa. We have documentation that indicates that that is still the case. Renamo forces have been trained in Kenya. It's absolutely critical that pressure be brought to bear on any parties that are providing assistance to Renamo, that they immediately stop, and that also pressure be brought to bear on the talks so that agreements can be reached as soon as possible. People are running into relief camps at the thousands per day.
You just came back from the region, and we want to take advantage of that by looking at some pictures, both provided to us by World Vision and some stills which you brought back. So tell us more about what you saw there with your own eyes. We see this.
Well, this is a bit of the good news in some ways. This particular picture actually was taken in Zambia. It's important to note that the drought that's currently affecting Southern Africa is affecting all of the region. And there was good news in the sense that people are working to help themselves. The woman in the previous picture is involved in handcrafts to raise income for her family. These women, unfortunately, still have the hard task of going for water, and they're on their way to do that. But it's at the site of a food for work program.
What kind of food is in this?
These are some vegetables, and it's important to note that, you know, people are still in a position to buy food in the market, albeit the prices of food are increasing and going up because of economic reforms that the government has undertaken. But these women, they're smiling and they're saying, it's not handouts that we want. We are willing to work for our food, and the work that they are doing is going to benefit their community. They're digging ditches so that when it finally does rain in this area, it won't flood out. This woman just previously was pulling up a plant called chikunguru, which absorbs too much water, and it's not a very good crop to be in the ground when there's a drought.
Is there as much looting as there is elsewhere in Mozambique? You know,
in Mozambique, the issue, I'm sorry, it's more insecurity. We have certainly seen where Renamo is breaking into warehouses and looting food. You know, the tactics that they've used since 1980 have basically been attacking not only infrastructure, but also people and farms, kidnapping children, all as a part of South Africa's destabilization campaign to maintain economic dominance in the region. But the people of Mozambique are suffering as a result. 1 million Mozambicans have died over the last decade because of the war that's being waged by Renamo.
And I have to ask, since you work for Bread for the World, which is doing good all over the world, the United States has been beset by tragedies in Florida and in Hawaii. Have you noticed less willingness to give to faraway places like Africa?
Yes, we've certainly seen that. In fact, I understand from the organizations that are operational, Bread for the World is a policy organization. They've only received 3% of the donations this year of those donations that have been received in '85. But Bread for the World believes that needs at home are important, needs abroad are important, and our agenda certainly is working toward trying to increase the funds that are provided to needy children in this country. And as far as our foreign aid is concerned, we're not asking for more. We're just asking that our aid be better spent, more on meeting human need, less on military expenditure.
You won some lobbying victories with this Congress here in Washington. Would you tell us of your victories?
Yes. On the domestic side, we've been able to get increases in a special feeding program for children, the Women, Infants, and Children's Feeding Supplemental Program. Just earlier this year on the overseas side, we were instrumental in getting the passage of the Horn of Africa Recovery and Food Security Act, which mandates a reorientation of U.S. policy away from war and military aid toward conflict resolution, grassroots development, and peace.
I regret our time is up. Sharon Pauling, African Policy Analyst for Bread for the World. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much.
Jim.
David, thanks. Amnesty International is accusing Sudan's army of secretly executing hundreds of civilians. The group says the executions took place in Juba, a regional capital that has been under siege by rebel forces for 4 years. Amnesty contends that government forces killed at least 300 unarmed civilians and prisoners on suspicion of being rebel sympathizers. The group is asking the military government to stop the killings. Tomorrow on the International Hour, we'll debate these alleged human rights violations in Sudan. Well, still ahead, new signs of stability for the French franc after the government tries to prop it up. And elsewhere in France, floodwaters measure 10 feet deep. We'll have more when we continue.
After year, Sears brings you one beautiful wish book after another. It's always a favorite for hassle-free holiday shopping right from your home with our 24-hour order line. And this special new wish kit is an exclusive TV offer. You get the wish book for just $4, plus a $5 certificate toward purchase and this brand new telephone free. Shop over 2,000 toys, games, and sporting goods, apparel, jewelry, electronics, great values like this. For girls, choose Huffy's Double Take Bike. For boys, the Mudslinger with Muck Muncher tires. Start your child's engine with this Texaco Haviland stock car, either battery or pedal powered. Shopping by phone with our trained consultants is like having a friend to help, and we'll deliver right to you. To receive this special offer, call 1-800-225-3300 for rush delivery. For a $4 charge to your credit card, we'll send you a free telephone and the $5 certificate along with your wish book. For rush delivery, call 1-800-225-3300.
This week, in Time and Entertainment Weekly, Mr. Coffee introduces the new water filter.
Now get great tasting water, fast, with the Mr. Coffee water filter. Makes your tap water taste as good as bottled water at a fraction of the cost. Mr. Coffee, what'll you think of next?
For more on Mr. Coffee's new water filter, look for a special ad in this week's Time and Entertainment Weekly.
Who are you going to call the most this month?
My grandparents in Philippines.
My uncle, Super Money, who lives in Agra, India.
With Sprint's new program, The Most, you automatically save 20% off whoever you call the most each month.
I call Wim in the Netherlands.
And with The Most, you can also choose a plan that lets you save 20% on international calls.
Mom in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
My sister in Munich.
My sister in Sri Lanka.
Doesn't anyone have relatives in Buffalo anymore?
There were some signs of support for the French franc today on the currency markets. French and German officials said they will jointly come to the defense of the franc. It's been under heavy pressure from currency traders. Early in the day, the Bank of France tried to prop up the franc's value by raising a key interest rate. It apparently had some effect as the franc grew stronger in late afternoon trading. Some of the deadliest floods in decades have struck southern France and parts of Italy. Officials say at least 29 people are dead and dozens more injured. CNN's Rick Salinger has details.
The vastness of the flooding could be seen from the air. Throughout southeast France and northwest Italy, floodwaters cut off towns and isolated communities. The water is 10 feet deep in some areas. More than a foot of rain fell in 3 hours. Cars are useless. The only way to get around is by boat. Helicopters searched for victims. The death toll is already more than 24, and more victims could be revealed as waters recede. More than 1,000 rescue workers, including many soldiers, are helping remove those trapped by the waters. Many of those flooded out were brought to emergency centers. There they were wrapped in blankets as they shivered in shock and fought to hold back the tears. This woman says she was forced to leave through a window and had to be rescued from the ledge of her home. The floods hit first at night. There was little chance to escape. In one town, a 50-foot wall of water tossed cars about like toys. Some vehicles even landed on roofs of buildings. Boats cruised through the streets looking for those needing help. Gas was cut off for fear of explosions. The hardest hit areas are the Ardèche and Vaucluse regions of southern France, including the town of Vaison-la-Romaine, where more than a dozen died. The floods also hit just over the border in Italy. Italian television reported a mother and daughter missing near Savona after being swept away. Torrential rains closed highways, blocked roads and railways. What were normally quiet streams turned into raging torrents. Heavy equipment was used to build dikes, but couldn't keep up with the rising water. The same weather system is blamed for heavy rains in Britain. 4 feet of water flooded parts of London. A number of people had to be evacuated from their homes. But by far the worst damage is in southern France, which hasn't seen floods like this in half a century. Rick Salinger, CNN, London.
Up next, revisiting a city shattered by war. A report from Vukovar, Croatia, an early casualty of the ethnic battles in what was Yugoslavia.
Hot coffee and steak in front of strangers at 30,000 feet? Not till I switched. Now I fix it and forget it.
That's good. When people are watching you this closely, you just can't be worried about your dentures. That's why I fix it and forget it.
Fixident holds stronger than any other adhesive. It even stands up to the hottest liquids.
Sister, Grandpa?
He never would have tried this with his old adhesive.
For the strongest hold you can get, Fixident and forget it.
Freedent's the one.
Only one gum leads the way when you've got dental work, and that's Freedent. Freedent won't stick to your dental work, so you can be confident chewing it. And because it also moistens your mouth and freshens your breath, Freedent's in a class by itself.
Freedent's the one that took the stick out of gum, and Freedent moistens your mouth. Yeah, moistens your mouth and freshens your breath while you chew.
Non-stick Freedent moistens your mouth and freshens your breath.
You got a hold on me.
Presenting the new Gillette Sensor for Women razor.
You got a hold on me.
Its unique handle is easier to hold onto for total control. And its spring-mounted twin blades and pivoting head hold onto every curve for fewer nicks and cuts. So smooth. So silky. The new Gillette Sensor for Women. Finally, a razor worth holding on to.
Tonight, meet supermodel Claudia Schiffer and the controversial author Gore Vidal, and your phone calls. All tonight on Larry King Live, 9 Eastern on CNN.
When it comes to making money, Britain's most famous prostitute has decided that the pen is mightier than the sordid. Lindy St. Clair, also known as Miss Whiplash, has a big tax bill to pay. So to help pay for it, she's written her autobiography. She held her book launch today here in London. It's probably the first at which the author was carrying a bullwhip. St. Clair says she's catered to the desires of over 200 members of British Parliament, but don't look for any big names in her book. She says she doesn't want to hurt her men. Coming up later this hour on CNN World Report, political turmoil in the Middle East is taking its toll on the region's most defenseless victims, its children. We'll get the perspective of Jordanian TV.
And a battle over market share in Australia has lit up a nasty dispute between the makers of energy-efficient light bulbs.
Have you thought about long distance lately? Are you getting the service you expected? AT&T has more people to help you than anyone else. Call 1-800-428-7999 and come back to AT&T for free. Whatever happened to those big savings? What does big mean anyway? Are there people your savings plan doesn't even cover? The AT&T Any Hour Saver plan is easy. It could save you money on AT&T calls to anyone, anywhere, anytime. Did you know that with some companies you get 2 phone bills each month? Is life too short for that? With AT&T, you get 1 simple bill a month, not 2. Competitive prices and service that's personal. Call 1-800-428-7999 and we'll switch you back for free. AT&T. You couldn't pick a better time to come back.
International Hour continues, followed by Early Prime after this local commercial break. Next on CNN.
For the first time ever on TNT.
Singing in the rain, just singing in the rain. What a glorious feeling, I'm happy again.
One of our favorite movies, Singin' in the Rain, premieres Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern.
Here's an opportunity to receive a free copy of William F. Buckley's controversial essay, In Search of Anti-Semitism.
I want to share something with you that's very important and especially enjoyable to me. It's Bill Buckley's National Review. When you get National Review, you'll find it's informative, probing, challenging, and very entertaining. It's not on many newsstands, so this may be your only chance to get a trial subscription.
For a trial subscription to National Review, call 1-800-257-1257.
This is CNN.
Checking the day's top stories, Yugoslav Prime Minister Milan Panic says his country's exclusion from the UN General Assembly has hurt chances for peace in the Balkans. UN member nations adopted a resolution late yesterday barring what's left of Yugoslavia from participating in the General Assembly. More than 24 people are now reported dead and dozens more are still missing in flood-ravaged southern France. The violent storm system that swept through the region yesterday hit England today. Russian officials have revealed that 2 American prisoners died in the 1940s after serving long terms in Soviet camps. They were civilians arrested as spies by Stalin's secret police. And at least one of them was killed after his sentence was up.
Now for the latest financial news, we go to Jan Hopkins at the business desk.
Thanks, David. There's lots of instability today in the currency market. The dollar hit an all-time low of 119.5 against the Japanese currency this morning. It's recovered a bit since, but right now the dollar is down a yen against the Japanese currency, and it's at 119.95. The dollar is also slightly lower against the German mark. It's down 2 cents against the British pound, and the dollar is lower against the French franc. Stocks on Wall Street are lower after yesterday's big loss. The Dow Industrial's down another 3 points at 3277.86. Trading volume today is heavy. The other markets are mostly lower. Only the S&P 500 index is higher. Allied Signal stock is up 3/4 at 53.5. The diversified U.S. manufacturer plans to sell its 39% stake in Union Texas Petroleum, worth about $500 million. Union Texas stock is down 3/4 at 17 3/4. U.S. bond prices are a bit lower following yesterday's 1.5-point loss. Right now, the Treasury's 30-year issue is down another 5/32 in price, and that yield is at 7.48%. Finally, in its Beige Book report, the Federal Reserve says the U.S. economy continues to grow slowly but unevenly. Growth is particularly slow in California. The report points out that retail sales improved across the country, but there is weakness in autos and aerospace. That's the latest in financial headlines. We'll be back in 1 hour with the closing numbers from Wall Street. From the CNN Business News Desk in New York, I'm Jan Hopkins.
Thanks, Jan. And when we come back, Thailand names a new prime minister. Can he restore democracy amid the chaos?
And we'll return to the Croatian city of Vukovar, where the fighting has ended, but the fear and uncertainty remain.
Now that the Cold War's over, it's time to invest at home. Invest in medicine. Invest in the arts. Technology. housing, and in education. And when you think about it, when you invest in our children and in our public schools, you invest in everything. Children, our most precious national resource.
Freedom's the one.
Only one gum leads the way when you've got dental work, and that's Freedent. Freedent won't stick to your dental work, so you can be confident chewing it. And because it also moistens your mouth and freshens your breath, Freedent's in a class by itself.
Freedent's the one that took the stick out of gum, and Freedent moistens your mouth. Yeah, moistens your mouth and freshens your breath while you chew.
Non-stick Freedent moistens your mouth and freshens your breath.
Who are you going to call the most this month?
My grandparents in Philippines.
My uncle, Supermonium, who lives in Agra, India.
With Sprint's new program, The Most, you automatically save 20% off whoever you call the most each month.
I call them in the Netherlands.
And with The Most, you can also choose a plan that lets you save 20% on international calls.
A mom in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
My sister in Munich?
My sister in Sri Lanka.
Doesn't anyone have relatives in Buffalo anymore?
On CNN today, natural disasters. Meet one family who can't avoid them on Early Prime. Then on Showbiz Today, live from New York, the new cast of Saturday Night Live. All today on CNN.
I'm Cheryl Atkinson.
I'm Lou Waters. Here's what's ahead at the top of the hour for our U.S. viewers. Americans continue the frantic search to look better, to look younger.
As the baby boomers approach age 50, will they be able to find a new comfort zone in which it's okay to grow old?
Our series, Coming of Age, continues at the top of the hour on Early Prime. Hope you can join us. Now back to David French in Washington and the rest of the International Hour.
Thanks, Lou. The U.S. and its allies want Iraq to pay for UN weapons inspections and humanitarian work undertaken since the end of the Gulf War. The allies are expected to propose the release of hundreds of millions of dollars in frozen Iraqi assets held in U.S. and European banks. A resolution could be drafted that would allocate the transfer of those funds to the UN. One Bush administration official says the move could come this month. Palestinians opposed to the course of peace talks with Israel staged a general strike in parts of the occupied territories today. Israeli soldiers clashed with rock throwers in the Gaza Strip. One 15-year-old boy was injured. In Washington, those talks continued with the chief Syrian delegate apparently ruling out for now Israel's call for an Israeli-Syrian summit. He said progress needs to be made in Washington first. In New York, Syria's foreign minister says Syria favors total peace in exchange for Israel's total withdrawal from occupied territories.
Thailand has a new prime minister today. Democrat Party leader Chuan Lik Pai became the country's 20th prime minister in a short ceremony today. Chuan has pledged to end the military's domination of politics. He takes over from an interim government that replaced General Suchinda Kraprayun. Suchinda resigned after his troops opened fire on pro-democracy demonstrators last May. Chuan has promised to account for hundreds of people reported missing since that violence.
Russian leaders have won some breathing room in a bitter showdown with legislators. The largely conservative legislature opposes the Yeltsin government's plan for economic reform. Today, they came to the brink of a no-confidence vote against the leadership. But instead, lawmakers postponed the vote until after they hear from President Boris Yeltsin. No date has been set for Yeltsin to address the legislature.
While most of the fighting in what used to be Yugoslavia centers now on Sarajevo, a year ago the city of Vukovar was under siege by Serbian forces. The fighting in that Croatian city left 3,000 people dead. The fighting stopped 10 months ago, but fear remains a part of everyday life in Vukovar, as Andrew Simmons reports.
Nothing was sacred in the Battle of Vukovar. This is no longer a town. It is a contorted monument symbolizing hatred, suffering, and death. There wasn't a single building which escaped the 3-month barrage. People had to live underground in cellars to have any hope of survival. 45,000 had homes here, half of them Serbian, half Croatian. Less than a quarter of that number now try to live in what is left. All but a few are Serbs. The Croats have been forced out of the self-declared Serbian Republic. There's a plan, though, for thousands to return by the end of the month. Mira Jerkovic is a Serb who lost 7 relatives in the fighting, including her husband, shot dead in the street outside, and her father murdered here in the rubble of what was her home for the past 27 years. She says she could never live alongside Croats again.
In this situation, we cannot live together anymore. They have done many bad things to us.
For these children who start the autumn term in a restaurant converted into a schoolroom, the trauma of the fighting is no longer talked about. But even they understand the significance of the redrawn map and the absence of so many teachers and classmates.
We explained that their Croatian teachers had gone. They answered, we don't want them back. For their Croatian friends, they feel sorry that they can no longer play together.
Their original school should really be knocked down. Like everywhere else in Vukovar, it was a target. But instead of rebuilding, there are attempts at repairs in the town which will be named in children's history books alongside Dresden and Stalingrad in the Second World War. In 1945, though, everyone knew the war was over. Here, amongst the rubble and despair of Vukovar, there is an eerie tension. The rebuilding can't begin until there's a political settlement. And UN peacekeepers say Croats cannot be returned because the peace process is at stalemate. The big guns may be off the streets, but paramilitaries with automatic weapons refuse to hand them over. Regular police are the only ones complying with UN regulations restricting them to sidearms.
Every day they are shooting in the first line. People is scared. You must understand.
They don't trust each other. There is an illness in this society. And because they possess so many weapons, this is a huge problem.
It is 10 months since the fighting stopped. A harsh winter lies ahead. Like everyone else in Vukovar, Mira Jerkovic cannot retrieve any semblance of normality because she is unsure whether the fighting could start again. The only certainty here, where the graves of unnamed Serbs and Croats are side by side, is that those who survived what happened will never forgive each other. Andrew Simmons, News at 10, Vukovar.
And that's it for this segment of the International Hour.
Now let's check in with Ralph Wenge for a look at what's ahead on World Report.
David, thank you. Coming up next, the struggle to help Croatian orphans caught up in the fighting in the Balkans.
Year after year, Sears brings you one beautiful wish book after another. It's always a favorite for hassle-free holiday shopping right from your home with our 24-hour order line. And this special new Wish Kit is an exclusive TV offer. You get the Wish Book for just $4, plus a $5 certificate toward purchase and this brand new telephone free. Shop over 2,000 toys, games, and sporting goods, apparel, jewelry, electronics, great values like this. Pump up with AirTech skates, the first high-performance inline skates with an air system. Shape up with the 5,000 Total Gym, offering 35 different exercises. Shopping by phone with our trained consultants is like having a friend to help, and we'll deliver right to you. To receive this special offer, call 1-800-225-3300 for rush delivery. For a $4 charge to your credit card, we'll send you a free telephone and the $5 certificate along with your wish book. For rush delivery, call 1-800-225-3300.
Bay's English Muffins proudly presents a symphony of flavors your family will applaud. Bay's English Muffins. They bring your favorite ingredients into perfect harmony every time. In your grocer's dairy case, Bay's.
Hey, Dad, that's Mackerel Cove.
Yep.
I haven't thought of that place in years.
Well, we have. Your mom and I are going to build a summer house there.
But you'd save all year just to go there for a week. And now you're going to build a house there?
Well, the truth is, we started building it a long time ago.
Since 1928, families have invested with Scudder, America's first family of no-load funds.
And welcome to CNN World Report, where we bring you the news as reported by the world's broadcasters from their perspective. I'm Ralph Wenge. The mood at the current round of the Arab-Israeli peace talks has shifted between hopes of a breakthrough to worries about a stalemate. But whatever the outcome of the negotiations in Washington, an unchanging reality of conflict in the Middle East is the plight of the children. Jordan TV gives its perspective of the impact of political turmoil on the region's youngest residents.
These are the prime victims of the Arab world. In the past 2 decades, 15 million children were either killed, injured, or starved to death because of the conflicts and wars in the region. Today, for example, in Somalia, large numbers of children are starving to death as a result of the civil war and drought. War and sanctions in Iraq have caused the death of thousands of children. Those who survived face a life filled with psychological trauma.
Many children have depression, anxiety, phobia. They are afraid from sounds. They have disturbance in talk, what we call it disturb in talk, disturb in sleep disturbance. They also, some of them, they have an aggressive attitude against others, even against their fathers and against the family.
Almost all Palestinian children in the Israeli-occupied territories have been subject one way or another to physical abuse, but all are suffering from psychological impact of the occupation.
There are the invisible aspects, the invisible ones that sometimes appear in their dreams, sometimes they appear in their way of dealing with one another. Whatever we can really see out of the invisible part in human beings, in children in particular, is something very horrible for the future.
In view of the situation of the Arab children, the Middle East Council of Churches organized a 3-day seminar on children of war. They decided that governmental and non-governmental organizations should work together to protect the future of the Arab children.
Our region is going through wars that have not yet been fully solved. And it is high time for us people from the religious communities and the political communities to deal with those who have been neglected until now.
This seminar also aimed at spreading awareness of the need to adopt and implement the Convention on the Right of Child and the resolutions of the World Summit held in New York in 1990. As innocent victims stood to suffer the most from man-made disasters, a collective humanitarian effort should be launched before their misery is further aggravated. For CNN World Report, this is Maha Shaif, Jordan Television.
War has taken a terrible toll as well on the children caught in the crossfire in the Balkans. In Croatia, the conflict has turned many youngsters into orphans, and in some cases, the horror doesn't stop there. As the BBC reports, some children have lost not only their parents, but their orphanage as well.
The orphans of Lipik, more than 100 miles from home. About half of the 80 children are being cared for on the Adriatic coast because there's nothing to go back to. The Lipik orphanage was hit by the very first mortar bomb fired by the Serbs when they attacked the town just over a year ago. The children had hidden in the cellar and stayed there for a whole week. Months of intense fighting left little standing. The sight appalled the officer commanding the British contingent of UN forces here. He's determined the orphanage will be rebuilt because he says the children are the future. But it'll cost £500,000.
I've got to raise a hell of a lot of money. But it's wonderful because the British soldiers who I command out there have really taken this on as their cause. And last weekend, we all worked out there for 2 days, absolutely solid, and they want to come back next weekend, they want to give up their leave, and they're really enthusiastic.
To the children, the Colonel's efforts make him a hero. Mr. Cook is a very good man, says one orphan. He said we'll be back home by Christmas. In this young group, Croats, Serbs, Muslims, Romanis and Slovaks get along fine. Lipik itself had a similar ethnic and religious mix, but the town, famous for its glass and mineral water and its stud farm, was all but destroyed in the savage fighting last autumn. About 100 residents were killed. UN troops patrol Lipik now, but local people claim Serbian forces are still only 2 kilometers away. Every Thursday, they say, there's an uneasy standoff between Croats and Serbs either side of the UN checkpoint. Despite the hatred, intermarriages mean family news has to be exchanged somehow. The mayor of Lipik says Croats will never again share the town with Serbs as they once did. In me, he says, there is only rage. His house, too, was ruined, just like the orphanage, the town hall, and scores of homes. Rebuilding has started, but you can drive for 5 miles through this town and into the countryside and see nothing but devastation. The orphans who long to live here again are a tiny fraction of the estimated 600,000 Croatians who are homeless or displaced. As winter approaches, only a quarter of Lipik's residents are here. The others, who are still refugees, probably know that there's not much to come back to. George Eakin, BBC News, Croatia.
When CNN World Report continues, a poor desert land is transformed into a modern state. We'll look back at 60 years of change in Saudi Arabia. First, however, the forecast for some cities around the world.
What's the coldest place on Earth? The North Pole? The South Pole? No, it's your home the day your heating goes out.
I think we need help. Fast.
Rude is ready to solve your heating problems with reliable Rude products and straight answers. His job's not done until you're comfortable.
Home sweet home.
You can rely on it.
Rely on Rude.
Can't believe he broke it at the company picnic.
Incredible. Our employee health plan covers it.